Welcome to Superhero Pow. I'm your host nerd, Tom Fremgen. Hey, let's talk about my favorite superhero again. Batman. The only mainstream superhero to ever expose his junk in all four colors. Well, today I'm going to talk about a different popular aspect of the character, his fighting ability.
Again?
Yes, again. Shut up and enjoy. Now, we all know Batman is the best superhero fighter of the day. I say of the day because Karate Kid is the best all time. He's tossed Superboy and punched out a force field for crying out loud. But then what do you expect? He's from the 31st century. In our century, Batman is the man. Yet, there are 3 people who can actually beat him more times than not. To clarify what I'm talking about characters with normal human physical, mental, spiritual, and learned abilities. So superpowered characters, even in the vein of Deathstroke and Wolverine, don't apply. Who are these characters that I'm talking about? None other than DC's martial art trio, Bronze Tiger, Lady Shiva, and Richard Dragon. The Bronze Tiger, aka Ben Turner, and Richard Dragon both come from the novel Dragon's Fist by Denny O'Neil and Jim Barry, under the pen name Jim Dennis. Somehow Denny then convinced DC to buy the rights to the character from him, and then he adapted the novel into the first 4 issues of Richard Dragon Kung Fu Fighter. In issue number 5, he introduced Lady Shiva. And believe it or not, each one of them is more than a match for the Caped Crusader. Now since 2000, DC has rewritten and rebooted these 3 characters with fairly disturbing results. So it's best not to talk about all the rape, murder, and deals with the devil. Let's just stick to the original characters. First up, the Bronze Tiger, because I've talked about him before. As a teenager, Ben Turner was living in Japan and studying Kung Fu, helping him deal with some anger issues from O-sensei, a Chinese monk who had fled Red China. While training, he meets Richard Dragon, and the 2 become best buds. Unfortunately, near the end of the series, Ben was captured by the League of Assassins and brainwashed into the Bronze Tiger. After breaking the League's control, he ended up working as a villain wrangler for the Suicide Squad. So has he ever fought Batman? You know he has, in the infamous Detective Comics number 485 from 1979. While still working for the League of Assassins, the Bronze Tiger shows up to kill the original Batwoman, Kathy Kane. Since she's retired, Batman steps up and is dropped before he even knew the fight started. He blocks a quick feint, and then it's lights out as the Bronze Tiger effectively knocks the wind out of him. Poor Kathy is then killed. But then in a move most likely to protect Ben Turner's good name, they say he didn't kill Kathy. It was just one of the other thugs with him. When Batman tracks him down in the same issue for a rematch, he isn't sure who did it either. But this time Batman is much more wary of the Bronze Tiger's ability. Still, as they fight, Batman comments that the Bronze Tiger is getting the best of him. Unfortunately for us, the fight is then interrupted by a poison dart. But without some kind of interruption, I'm pretty sure the Bronze Tiger was going to win again. Next up, Lady Shiva, aka Sandra Wusen, the goddaughter of O-sensei, the man who trained the Bronze Tiger and Richard Dragon. Presumably, she had been training with him her whole life, to which she has dedicated her life to the martial arts and challenging anyone she finds worthy. She doesn't see good and evil as much as she sees skilled and not skilled. But when a villain lies to her and tells her that her sister Carolyn was killed by Richard Dragon, she goes after him hard. Richard manages to convince her of the truth, and the 2 become friends. And simply put, she becomes a better person whenever he's around. So, has she ever fought Batman? Yes, she has, in Batman number 427 from 1988. In the infamous Death in the Family story, where fans called 900 numbers to vote on whether or not to kill Jason Todd. Which they did, but he got better. As this issue goes, Batman and Robin are looking for women who could be Jason's mother. Don't ask. And they think Shiva might be one. Shiva is in the process of training mercenaries and jumps at the chance to fight Batman. First, she takes out Robin before Batman even realizes she's there. While impressed, Batman still doesn't realize what a credible threat she is. So he's quite surprised to find that he's in the fight of his life. And when he finally lands a solid blow, he's stunned to see it barely fazed her. With his chances of winning in doubt, Robin gets back on his feet and nails her from behind. This gives Batman just enough edge to defeat her. But without Robin's help, I think Batman was going down. Oh, and if you're curious, while under the influence of sodium pentothal, aka truth serum, Shiva admits she never had any children. Now the main event, Richard Dragon. While I assume Dragon isn't his real name, we don't know any other. As a teenager, Richard was a homeless petty thief in Japan, attempting to rob O-sensei's dojo. He's caught by O-sensei and Ben Turner. The monk then takes the boy in and teaches him. Growing into young men, Richard and Ben get involved in various espionage missions that never go well. Leaving the world of Cloak and Dagger behind him, Richard now spends most of his time trying to live peacefully and teach others. The Question and Huntress are his most famous students. Now, has he ever fought Batman? Of course he has. But first, let's see why Dragon is the main event compared to Shiva and Ben. In Richard Dragon Kung Fu Fighter number 11 from 1976, Richard Dragon is resting up in a hospital when an armored samurai attacks. First he whips Ben, then he whips Shiva, then Richard gets out of bed and kicks him out of a window. Later on, Richard would kill the samurai in combat, so I think this proves Richard is the best of them. Putting my own personal spin on it, I always felt Richard is more skilled, where Shiva was faster and Ben was stronger. So then, when did he fight Batman, you ask? Well, they kinda fought in The Brave and the Bold number 132 from 1977. While hanging out in Gotham City, Richard is attacked by an assassin. Batman shows up when Richard has the better of the assassin and mistakes Richard as the bad guy. He attacks Richard and they spar for a while until Richard, not wanting to fight anymore, just blocks all of Batman's attacks. Being rather smart, Batman picks up on this and the fight ends. The two then team up, it was the Brave and the Bold, and track down the assassin. So, not much of a fight, but I'd still say Richard had the edge. But thanks to the villainous Dr. Moon, we can compare Batman and Richard Dragon even more, as they both fought, for all intended purposes, the same foe. In Richard Dragon Kung Fu Fighter number 7 from 1976, Dr. Moon, in hopes of creating the perfect warrior, experimented on a hugely powerful man. With surgically implanted body armor, Topper, as he was called, was nigh unstoppable. But Richard Dragon took him out, just barely. Then in Detective Comics number 480 from 1978, Dr. Moon is at it again. This time his subject is a large, out-of-shape, mentally challenged young man. When Dr. Moon is done, Gork, as he was called, was a mass of brainless muscle, with the patented surgically implanted body armor. After Gork and Batman are done slugging it out, Gork is the only one left standing. But before he can kill Batman, Gork's body starts to shut down and the poor fella dies instead. So there you go. Against basically identical foes, Richard Dragon wins and Batman loses, making Richard Dragon the greatest DC fighter of the day. Because, Karate Kid. Anyway, there are 3 people who can beat the Bat. I guess Batman's just lucky that neither of them are really villains. Now, as always, thanks so much for listening to me ramble on. And if you could be so kind and subscribe, I would sincerely appreciate it, because I don't want to find a real job. I did it once and I didn't like it.